Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. I am indeed the Everton-supporting Mayor of Greater Manchester. The level of tolerance shown by the good people of Greater Manchester in electing a Liverpool-born mayor gives real hope, Gordon, for a better Britain, because, you know, that's reaching out, right? So you will know me, perhaps, from my time in Parliament. So I was 16 years in Parliament. I've been 6 years now as the first elected mayor of Greater Manchester, working alongside the brilliant Tracy Brabin. And like everyone, I'm not here to lecture anybody. I'm here to share my experience of my journey and what that might mean to you, and what that might mean as we try and put forward a radical plan for a rewired Britain, because that's what I believe we need. That's where I have come to as I speak to you tonight. So I can actually pinpoint exactly the moment that my political journey changed. It was in 2009. I was Culture Secretary, very proud to be so, in Gordon's cabinet. But what happened for me was a sort of personal moment of truth. And it was when I got an invitation to speak to the 20th anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster at Anfield. And immediately, it kind of threw me into the biggest crisis that I could have imagined. Because I was at the other semi-final on that day. All of my friends were Liverpool supporters. I had been at Hillsborough myself the year before. I knew that ground was unsafe. And when my friends came home from that ground that day, the day after, I sat with them in the pub as they returned, traumatized. I knew everything about what had happened, but imagine then how it felt when certain newspapers started to blame those supporters within days and tell one of the biggest lies that this country has ever seen. I knew all of that. I carried it with me all of those years. I was 19, as I say then. I was 39 when I was in Gordon's cabinet on that 20th anniversary. And it was a personal moment of truth. Because if I'm honest, I have to be honest, I knew I was in a government that hadn't done enough on that issue. And I had to decide, could I go to Anfield and face the people that I'd grown up with, even dare to speak for them? Or was I just going to hold back from it all and sort of hold the official line? Now, without going through all the details, obviously I chose the former. And actually, when I kind of made my way towards Anfield that day, I was in fact taking my first steps out of the Westminster system that I'd been in for 8 years. I was making something of a psychological break, because I had decided to use whatever I had in terms of political capital that I built up to get the truth told and to get that injustice overturned. And that's what I began from that day, with the help of Gordon Brown, actually, in a cabinet meeting the very next day. That's where it started. But it was a long road. And you know what I learned on that long road? I kind of heard prejudices about Liverpool and the northwest of England that I kind of suspected were there in the heart of government. But it is still something of a shock when you hear them out loud said to you, when you're speaking up for the place where you were born. And that experience of going through that journey basically kind of changed me, I guess. I was a different politician before that. But it kind of brought me to my senses as to why I was there. Why was I there? What was I there to do? If I couldn't stand up and be counted on that issue, then I came to the view I would have no worth at all. And we came to a point 7 years on when I'd sort of confronted, I think, some of the worst of the Whitehall machine. But we finally got there, and we got the second inquest and the verdict of unlawful killing, the truth finally told. But the thing was, I didn't feel a sense of victory. And I spoke in the House of Commons the day after that second inquest. And I posed a very deliberate question that was intended to make the place feel uncomfortable. Because I confronted people in Parliament that day and I asked a very simple question. I'll repeat it for you all this evening. How could an entire English city cry injustice for 20 years and nobody in that place did anything? Nobody listens. How could that happen? How could it be allowed to happen? And I didn't get an answer, and I still haven't had an answer from people in that system who still hold to everything that it stands for. But I can give you my answer. My answer is we don't have a parliament at the UK level that gives equal voice to all the nations and regions. It's a parliament where some people and some places are more equal than others. That is how it happens. It's a place where too much power is concentrated in too few hands. And because of that, the media can manipulate that power and it can create narratives about people and places that are untrue. And actually, for Hillsborough, read many other injustices that have stood in this country for far too long, because that is the way that it works. It often does not work in the wider public interest or the interest of natural justice. And that has to change. And that's why this tonight seems to me to feel like a different conversation. Certainly a different conversation than that Labour politicians have brought to Scotland. You know, I'm not here arguing for any status quo. I'm arguing for the radical rewiring of Britain. I don't think the place I love, the northwest of England, will ever get justice in terms of equal living standards, as people in the London and the southeast have, until we radically rewire Britain. That's why I'm here. But it does start, doesn't it, with reforming that parliament. And like Tracy, I absolutely endorse Gordon's plan for an elected Senate of the nations and regions. Just think of the House of Lords. Other people have mentioned it. The vast majority of them have their primary address within the M25. How can that represent everywhere equally? About 10% of them went to one private school in the southeast of England. You know which one I mean? By my reckoning, about the same number of members of the Lords have their primary address in Scotland. I mean, think about that. How can that represent you or us or West Yorkshire fairly? It can't, can it? And so we need that change. But I would add something else, because I think we need to change the House of Commons as well. I think we need voting reform. I don't believe all people... I don't believe that all people in all places will be equally represented in Westminster until every vote matters. And it's only when every vote matters that every place matters within Parliament. So to take the journey forward, I then lived through the pandemic, and that gave me another insight, and an insight about Scotland, I've got to say. But I did go through tough times in Greater Manchester. You may have seen we had a high case rate, and that was caused by the kind of grinding poverty that Mark Drakeford spoke so eloquently about. Too many people in insecure work, too many people in homes that damaged their health, and you saw that played out in West Yorkshire too, Tracy, in the pandemic. And we had to deal with that. And I did have to stand up to a Tory government who were trying to close down Greater Manchester in October 2020, but only give the people working in our bars and betting shops and bingo halls 2/3 furlough when other people were getting 80%. That was a point of principle, and we said no. And we did stand up for people in that moment. But something then happened in 2021 that I didn't expect to happen, when the Scottish government put a travel ban on Manchester, big move, Salford and Bolton without any consultation and any notification. I did not expect an SNP government in Holyrood here in Scotland to treat Greater Manchester as badly as a Tory government in Westminster, but that's what they did. It was exactly what they complained against for years when they talked about how Westminster treated Scotland, but they did it to us. They did it to us. And that was completely unacceptable from my point of view, and we stood up to it. But I'm building to a point, really, in terms of the change that we need, because I think when we've got politics in the UK where power is concentrated, as Tracy said, in too few places, in too small numbers of hands, that's when you get the wrong type of politics. It's too party-driven. You've always got the tensions of party in that system because everything's done through the lens of the party and what it wants. And actually, most people don't live their lives like that. When you devolve power out and down into different places, you create the conditions for a place-first approach rather than a party-first approach. And if you go with a place-first approach, that's a more unifying way to work and make things happen. It's a better way of working. From my point of view, I said that SNP had done things that it often criticised Westminster of doing. But as far as I could see, it has taken power up from cities and communities in Scotland, and it's concentrated power at the national level. And I don't think that's healthy. I honestly don't think that's healthy. While I might have expected them to treat Manchester, Salford and Bolton like they did, it did make me think, it did cross my mind, how are they treating their own communities? Are they getting a bit sort of dictated to as well? And I get the feeling they might be, because that's the sort of the politics that we've got. You know, if you have devolution to places like proud cities like Leeds and Manchester, you can work in a different way. We're working as a Greater Manchester Labour City region, but with a Lib Dem council leader who I was in Parliament with. And I'm pleased to see Willie Rennie here this evening, who I was also in Parliament with, because I do think we need to move to a more collaborative form of politics, as Tracy was saying, where we can work together for the common good. So, you know, if the SNP gave more of their power out to Dundee, to Aberdeen, obviously to Glasgow and other parts of Scotland, I can imagine that Tracy and I, in the course of a week or a fortnight, would be on the phone. If there was to be an elected mayor or provost of Glasgow, we would speak to that person, wouldn't we, Tracy, on a regular basis, or an elected provost of Aberdeen or Edinburgh, you name it. We would be speaking to that person all of the time. But then we would be doing the same with the elected mayor of Dublin, the elected mayor of Belfast. We collaborate ourselves as mayors, and it's just a practical way of working. The Conservative mayor of the West Midlands I talk to and I work with, because it's a better way of making these islands of ours a little bit more functional, a little bit more positive, more sense of doing for ourselves and building a better future, a better Britain. And that's what I think we need more of. We do need much more devolution. Credit to Mark Drakeford. He's doing it in practice now, because he invited myself and Steve Rotherham, the Mayor of Liverpool, over to North Wales recently, where we had an amazing event, actually, with colleagues from Ireland as well, where we talked about that corridor across the Irish Sea through North Wales into the northwest of England. And we've agreed to really deepen this conversation between us. That's the kind of collaboration that I'm talking about. We take inspiration from Mark. A basic income guarantee for care leavers. What a fantastic policy that is. That is a brilliant policy. And that's Welsh Labour. And we're dead proud of what Mark's doing. We would like to replicate it. But I am the first mayor in England to put buses back under public control. And we've welcomed Mark's team over to Manchester, to Greater Manchester, to share what we're doing so that we can help the same happen in Wales. And in that way, I think more devolved power is rolling back the 1980s, and that removal of the essentials from people and the placing of it in private hands. That is what is happening in practice. And it will actually be a proud moment for me tomorrow to be in Falkirk, to see the first B-network buses, electric buses, rolling off the production line at ADL in Falkirk. Greater Manchester's buses being built here in Scotland. That is the kind of practical industrial collaboration that we need to see more of across Britain. So I will finish by saying it is about a parliament, a kind of rewired parliament that represents all people and all places equally. But it is also about more power for more people and places to be masters of their own destiny, not always waiting for national parliaments to drop something on them from a great height, but actually able to change their lives for themselves. That's the better Britain that we need. And to finish, I think I can speak for Tracy too. The north of England is changing. We are changing. We are getting more organised. We have got a louder voice than we've ever had in my lifetime. And that's not going to change. We're not going to go back from that. It's only going to get more forceful as we go forward, because we've had too much for too long and we're not having it anymore. But we're doing it in a positive way. And I'm here to say we do want common cause with the city regions of Scotland, with the communities of Scotland, because we have common bonds, the north of England and Scotland. We do want to work with you where it's right for your places and it's right for us as well. That's what we're here to say. And I believe if we went forward on that basis and we got rid of some of the kind of the tribal approach, the party-first approach, that actually in the end alienates and divides, I think if we work in the way that we're describing tonight, where power is more evenly distributed throughout all parts of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, working with the Republic of Ireland as well, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, if that was the case, we would actually have a blueprint for a better Britain, a rewired Britain that would be more positive, it would be more practical, it would be more functional, it would be a better place to live. Thank you very much indeed for listening.